My knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as I navigated through Chicago's industrial district, a shortcut I'd normally avoid at midnight. But after a brutal 16-hour shift at Memorial Hospital, all I wanted was to get my 10-year-old daughter Zoe home quickly, so she could finally sleep in her own bed instead of the break room cot. The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the roof of my ancient Honda, as Zoe pressed her face against the passenger window, her reflection ghostly in the orange glow of scattered street lamps. "Mom, is that smoke?" she asked suddenly, pointing toward a dilapidated warehouse with a rusted sign reading, "Halliday Storage." My medical instincts kicked in before my common sense could object, as I squinted through the rain-streaked windshield at dark plumes billowing from the warehouse windows. No fire yet, just ominous smoke seeping into the night air. But experience told me that could change in seconds. I should have driven away, called 911 and kept my daughter safe like any sane mother would. Instead, I pulled into the gravel lot, the Honda's headlights cutting through darkness to reveal a padlocked door and a complete absence of other vehicles. Zoe's hand grabbed my arm as we both heard it, a man's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling for help from inside. "Mom, someone's in there," she whispered, her green eyes, mirror images of my own, wide with a determination that reminded me painfully of her father. "Stay in the car and lock the doors," I instructed, already reaching for my phone to call 911, when Zoe pointed at the building's roof where flames had begun to lick the skyline. No time for debate. If I waited for emergency services, whoever was inside wouldn't survive. The emergency kit from my trunk contained a small fire extinguisher and a pry bar I'd never used, remnants of my late husband Sam's insistence on roadside preparedness. 3 minutes, I told Zoe, as she ignored my earlier command and stood beside me in the rain. "If I'm not back, honk the horn 3 times and drive away." "I'm coming too," she insisted, her voice steady as she grabbed a flashlight from the kit, her rain jacket already soaked through. "We help people. That's what we do," she added, echoing my own words from countless dinner conversations about my work in the emergency department. With a deep breath that tasted of smoke and fear, I approached the warehouse, the pry bar slick in my grip as I attacked the rusted padlock. It gave way with a satisfying crack, and the door swung inward, releasing a billowing cloud of smoke that made us both stagger backward. We tied rain-dampened scarves around our faces and entered the darkness, Zoe's flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the thickening smoke. The warehouse interior loomed vast and cluttered with abandoned crates, the perfect tinderbox for a spreading fire. The coughing led us deeper inside, past rows of forgotten inventory, until Zoe's flashlight illuminated a scene I couldn't immediately process. A man chained to a support column, blood soaking through an expensive shirt, his face bruised almost beyond recognition. "Help me," he rasped, his one good eye finding mine with an intensity that sent ice through my veins. The chains around his wrists and ankles were secured with heavy padlocks, anchoring him to the column as smoke thickened around us and distant flames cast dancing shadows across his battered face. I worked methodically despite the chaos, assessing his injuries with clinical detachment. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, broken ribs, multiple contusions, but nothing immediately fatal except for the fire advancing toward us. "I'm Carrie. This is my daughter Zoe," I said as I examined the chains. "We're getting you out." The pry bar was useless against the industrial-grade locks, forcing us to change tactics as sweat mingled with rain on my face. "The chains," the man coughed, nodding toward a workbench in the corner. "The key should be in the drawer. They wanted me to know it was there but couldn't reach it." Zoe darted toward the bench, while I monitored the spreading flames that had begun consuming wooden crates along the far wall, filling the space with acrid smoke. "Who did this to you?" I asked, buying time and information while scanning for alternative escape routes if Zoe couldn't find the key. "People who want me dead," he answered simply, his voice startlingly calm despite his circumstances. "You should leave. They might come back to make sure the job is done, and you don't want to be found here when they do." Zoe returned triumphantly with a small brass key, her eyes watering from the smoke, but her hands steady as she worked the locks open. "I checked the back exit," she reported, displaying a situational awareness that both impressed and terrified me. "It's clear of fire and leads to an alley." The chains fell away with metallic clangs lost beneath the growing roar of flames, but the man collapsed against me, unable to support his weight after hours restrained in a standing position. I looped his arm over my shoulder, bearing his considerable weight as Zoe guided us toward the exit she'd found. Each step was agony for him, each breath a battle against thickening smoke for all of us, but we pushed forward as chunks of flaming debris began falling from the deteriorating ceiling. "Almost there," I encouraged, though my own lungs burned and my knees threatened to buckle under our shared weight. The back door burst open under Zoe's push, releasing us into the rain-soaked alley as an explosion rocked the warehouse behind us, the force knocking us forward onto the wet pavement. For a moment, we lay there gasping clean air, the cold rain a blessing against our smoke-heated skin. The man struggled to sit up, his gaze fixed on the burning building with an expression I couldn't decipher. Grief, anger, or perhaps relief. "My name is Lucas Montgomery," he said finally, his voice rough but controlled as he looked from me to Zoe. "And you just saved my life, which means yours will never be the same." Emergency vehicles wailed in the distance as I helped Lucas to his feet, supporting him toward my car while processing his cryptic warning. "We need to get you to a hospital," I insisted, falling back on protocol and training rather than acknowledging the growing unease in my gut. "No hospitals," Lucas countered with surprising firmness as he leaned heavily against my car. "They have people in every emergency room in Chicago. You'd be signing our death warrants." His good eye fixed on mine with an intensity that made argument impossible, even as sirens grew louder. I made a split-second decision that would alter our lives forever, helping Lucas into the passenger seat while Zoe scrambled into the back. "There's a cabin," I explained as I pulled away from the burning warehouse. "About 40 minutes north, near Lake Geneva, my husband's fishing retreat before he died." The drive was tense silence punctuated by Lucas's labored breathing and occasional directions from me to Zoe to apply pressure to his shoulder wound. My mind raced through possibilities and consequences, each worse than the last, as rain gave way to misty darkness on rural roads. Sam's cabin appeared exactly as we'd left it 6 months ago on our last weekend getaway, isolated, rustic, and stocked with the basic supplies I'd need. "It's not much," I apologized as I helped Lucas inside, "but it's off-grid and paid in cash years ago. No digital trail." Zoe immediately set about gathering towels and boiling water without being asked, her small face set in concentration as she channeled all the medical dramas she'd absorbed during her afternoons waiting for me at the hospital. "Is he a bad guy, Mom?" she whispered when Lucas was out of earshot in the bathroom. "I don't know," I answered honestly, unpacking my emergency medical kit that thankfully contained basic surgical supplies. "But right now, he's our patient, and we don't let patients die. That's our rule, remember?" The bullet had passed clean through Lucas's shoulder, missing major vessels but leaving significant tissue damage that required proper cleaning and suturing. "This will hurt," I warned as I sterilized my instruments with alcohol and flame, surprised by the steady calm in my hands despite everything. Lucas remained conscious through the entire procedure, his jaw clenched against the pain but eyes alert, watching my every move with what seemed like professional assessment. "You've done this before," he observed, "outside a hospital setting. 3 tours as a combat medic before medical school," I explained, focusing on creating neat, even stitches. "Afghanistan taught me how to work anywhere with whatever's available. This is luxury compared to a desert outpost during mortar fire." When I finished, Lucas made a phone call from a burner phone he'd kept hidden in his shoe. A single cryptic conversation in what sounded like Italian before he turned to us with grim determination. "A car will arrive at dawn to take us somewhere safer. My people need time to secure a proper location." The reality of our situation crashed over me as I tucked an exhausted Zoe into the cabin's small second bedroom. "I have a shift tomorrow," I whispered to myself. "Bills to pay. A life that doesn't include running from whoever tried to kill you." Morning arrived with headlights sweeping across the cabin windows as a black SUV pulled into the gravel drive. A man with silver-streaked dark hair emerged, moving with military precision as he assessed the surroundings before approaching our door. "Gabriel," Lucas acknowledged with visible relief as the man entered. "Report." The single command revealed a hierarchy I hadn't anticipated. Lucas was clearly accustomed to giving orders and having them followed without question. I watched their interaction from the kitchen doorway, cataloging details. Gabriel's deference despite his imposing presence, the Glock visible beneath his jacket, the satellite phone he handed to Lucas without comment. "Who exactly are you?" I finally asked, stepping forward as Zoe pressed against my side. Lucas's expression softened slightly as he looked at us, his bruises darkening against pale skin. "I run certain business operations in Chicago, some legal, others less so, and 2 days ago, someone I trusted arranged to have me eliminated." The television in the corner, which Zoe had turned on for distraction, suddenly switched to a breaking news report about the warehouse fire, showing footage of firefighters battling the still smoldering structure. Police are investigating possible connections to organized crime after discovering evidence of restraints inside the building. Gabriel turned up the volume as a female reporter continued. Sources close to the investigation say this may be connected to an ongoing turf war between the Montgomery and Rossini crime families, following the disappearance of Lucas Montgomery, rumored head of the Montgomery syndicate. My legs nearly gave out as I collapsed into the nearest chair, staring at Lucas while mentally connecting dots I'd been too distracted to see. His expensive watch despite his ruined clothes, the command in his voice, the security protocols that came as second nature to him. "You saved the life of one of Chicago's most influential crime bosses," Gabriel stated matter-of-factly, his eyes assessing me with new interest. "Which means both the Rossini family and certain law enforcement agencies will be looking for you and your daughter within hours." The next report confirmed my worst fears as my own hospital ID photo appeared on screen with the caption, "Police seeking Dr. Carrie Anderson and her daughter for questioning regarding the warehouse incident." My breath caught as I realized my car had likely been captured on traffic cameras near the scene. Lucas moved to stand directly in front of me, his injured arm now in a makeshift sling. "You have two choices, Dr. Anderson. Let my organization protect you both until this situation is resolved, or take your chances with a justice system that's already been compromised by Rossini's influence." Before I could respond, Gabriel's phone buzzed with an incoming text that made his expression darken. "We need to move now," he announced, already gathering our limited belongings. Rossini's men just showed up at the hospital asking questions about the doctor's schedule and home address. The journey to Lucas's estate took 3 hours, involving 2 vehicle changes and a helicopter ride that left Zoe wide-eyed with equal parts terror and excitement. I sat in numb silence, watching the Chicago skyline disappear as we flew northwest, toward what Gabriel called safer territory. Lucas's property surprised me, not the fortress I'd imagined, but an elegant farmhouse sprawled across 30 acres of rolling Wisconsin countryside, with security features discreetly integrated into its seemingly rustic design. "This was my grandmother's place," he explained as we landed on a hidden helipad behind the main house. A woman in her 60s greeted us at the door, her posture military straight despite her age, her eyes assessing Zoe and me with sharp intelligence. "Martha will show you to your rooms," Lucas directed. "Then join me in the study. There are things you need to know if you're going to survive this." The suite Martha led us to was larger than my entire apartment, with connecting bedrooms, a private bathroom stocked with brand new toiletries in our preferred brands, and closets filled with clothes that would fit us perfectly. "How did you know our sizes?" I asked, holding up a sweater that could have come from my own closet. "Mr. Montgomery's organization is thorough," Martha answered simply, leaving us to settle in with a promise that food would arrive shortly. "The property is completely secure. You're safer here than anywhere else in the country right now." When I entered Lucas's study an hour later, he was seated behind a mahogany desk, his injured arm properly bandaged, wearing fresh clothes that transformed him from victim to authority figure despite his lingering injuries. "First, thank you for my life," he began, gesturing for me to sit across from him. The study walls displayed framed photographs, Lucas shaking hands with city officials, cutting ribbons at charity events, standing beside a woman and teenage boy at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. "Your family?" I asked, nodding toward the photos. "My late wife and son," he answered, his expression tightening. "Car accident 5 years ago. At least, that's what it was made to look like, until I discovered it was arranged by the Rossini family, as warning against expanding into certain territories." His confession came without emotional display, just facts laid bare. He'd inherited his father's shipping business at 25 and discovered it was a front for money laundering. Rather than walk away, he'd built it into a criminal enterprise that eventually controlled half of Chicago's underworld while maintaining legitimate businesses that employed thousands. The Rossinis have been our rivals for generations, but we maintained an uneasy peace through territorial agreements until 3 months ago, when their operations began encroaching on areas we'd negotiated decades ago, Lucas explained, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid and sliding one toward me. I left the drink untouched, struggling to reconcile the articulate businessman before me with both the battered victim from the warehouse and the crime lord described on the news. "Why are you telling me this? Why not just set us up with new identities somewhere and let us disappear?" Lucas leaned forward, his good eye holding mine with unsettling intensity. "Because Franco Rossini knows exactly who you are now, And he'll never stop hunting the woman who prevented my death. You're part of this war whether you want to be or not, and your only chance is to understand exactly what you've walked into. Days melted into weeks at the Montgomery estate, as Zoe and I adjusted to our new reality. Protected guests, not quite prisoners, but far from free. Lucas arranged for our personal items to be retrieved from our apartment, our bills paid automatically, and my job temporarily covered by a medical leave of absence attributed to family emergency. Zoe adapted with the resilience of youth, finding unexpected joy in the estate's sprawling grounds, the horses in the stable, and the tutoring sessions Martha arranged to keep her education on track. I miss my friends, she confided one evening as I tucked her in, but it's kind of like an adventure too, like those witness protection shows we watched. I found myself drawn to Lucas despite every rational objection. His calm authority, the gentle way he spoke to Zoe, the glimpses of the man beneath the criminal empire. During his daily physical therapy sessions for his healing shoulder, I learned he had studied economics at Northwestern before his father's death forced him to take over the family business. What would you have been? I asked one afternoon, adjusting his resistance exercises as sunlight streamed through the gym windows. If your father hadn't died and you'd had a choice about your path? A shadow crossed his face as he considered the question that clearly no one had asked in years. An architect, maybe. I've always been fascinated by how spaces shape human behavior, how structure creates possibility. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who designed criminal enterprises that moved invisible through Chicago's economy had wanted to build tangible, lasting structures instead. It's not too late to change directions, I suggested, immediately regretting my naivety. Lucas's laugh held no humor as he completed his exercises with perfect form. In my world, Carrie, there are exactly 2 exits, prison or death, and I've been avoiding both for 15 years while trying to build something that could eventually become legitimate. My professional detachment crumbled as weeks passed, replaced by an uncomfortable understanding of the gray moral areas Lucas inhabited. I witnessed his protection of employees' families, his refusal to traffic drugs or humans, his careful navigation of violence as last resort rather than first option. After dinner one evening, I found him in his study reviewing surveillance footage from locations across the city, his expression grim as he studied faces looking for threats. "Any progress identifying who betrayed you?" I asked, setting a fresh cup of coffee beside him. "3 possibilities, all close to me," he answered, rubbing his now-healed shoulder absently. "Gabriel is investigating each one carefully. Betrayal requires consequences, but I won't punish the wrong person." The clinical precision of his statement sent a chill through me, despite the warmth between us that had been growing day by day. "And those consequences?" I asked, needing to hear it directly rather than pretend I didn't understand. Lucas met my gaze without flinching, his voice steady and certain. "In my world, treason means death, not from cruelty or vengeance, but because mercy to traitors gets more innocent people killed in the crossfire." 1 month into our stay, Lucas received intelligence that the Rossini family had proposed peace talks at neutral territory, a private room at the Chicago Art Institute, surrounded by priceless masterpieces that neither family would risk destroying in conflict. "It's a trap," Gabriel insisted during the strategy meeting I accidentally overheard from the hallway. "Probably," Lucas agreed, studying building schematics spread across his desk. "But refusing makes us look weak, and weakness invites more aggression. We need to control the variables instead of simply avoiding the meeting." Against my better judgment, I pushed open the study door and entered uninvited, drawing surprised looks from the half-dozen security personnel gathered around the table. "Take me with you," I said, heart pounding but voice steady. "As your personal physician, they won't expect it, and I can spot medical threats they might use." Lucas's refusal was immediate and absolute, but something in my expression made him pause and reconsider as I outlined my specialized knowledge of chemical agents and biological toxins from my military training. "You've kept me alive once already," he finally conceded with reluctance, "and your presence will be unexpected enough to potentially disrupt whatever they've planned." The Art Institute's marble halls echoed with our footsteps 3 days later, as Lucas led our small delegation toward the meeting room, my borrowed designer dress and medical bag creating the perfect cover for my presence. Gabriel flanked Lucas's left while I walked on his right, scanning for threats with eyes trained by years of emergency triage. Franco Rossini proved the opposite of Lucas in every way, flamboyant where Lucas was restrained, openly threatening where Lucas was measured, his entourage larger and more conspicuously armed as they entered from the opposite doorway. "Montgomery," he acknowledged with a mocking smile. Still healing from your unfortunate accident, I see. The negotiations began with superficial civility that barely masked murderous intent on both sides. I observed quietly, noting the way Franco's right-hand man kept touching his jacket pocket, the barely perceptible hand signals between Rossini's guards, the waiter who seemed unusually interested in our conversation. My suspicions crystallized when the waiter placed glasses of water before each person, but with a slightly different movement for Lucas's glass, almost imperceptible, but my combat medical training had made me hyper-aware of such details. "Don't drink that," I whispered, my hand covering Lucas's before he could reach for the glass. "The doctor thinks we'd poison you at peace talks?" Franco laughed incredulously, but the flash of anger in his eyes confirmed my suspicion. "Perhaps she should taste it herself to prove her loyalty to you, Montgomery." With deliberate calm, I pulled a small kit from my medical bag and tested the water, the liquid turning a telltale blue that revealed the presence of a tasteless, odorless compound that would have caused cardiac arrest within minutes. "I believe this concludes today's negotiations," Lucas stated, his voice deadly quiet as guards on both sides reached for weapons. The confrontation exploded in controlled violence as Gabriel overturned the heavy table for cover, while Lucas pulled me behind a marble column. Gunshots would bring security and police, so the battle was fought with knives and hand-to-hand combat that wouldn't attract immediate attention from museum guards. I watched in horrified fascination as Lucas moved with lethal precision, his previous injuries showing no evidence as he disarmed 2 attackers simultaneously before coming face-to-face with Franco himself. "This ends today," Lucas declared, holding a blade against the rival boss's throat in the sudden stillness that followed. Instead of fear, Franco smiled with chilling confidence. "Kill me, and the video of your doctor friend breaking you out of that warehouse goes public, along with proof she's been hiding you while officially listed as a missing person of interest. Her daughter becomes a ward of the state, while she serves time for aiding a known criminal." The tableau froze as Lucas processed this new threat, one aimed not at him but at me and Zoe, his blade unwavering against Franco's throat, while his eyes sought mine across the room. "Let him go," I said quietly, my medical training suddenly useful for a different kind of triage, determining which wounds would be survivable versus fatal for our future. The drive back to the estate passed in tense silence, Lucas's expression carved from stone as he stared out the window at Chicago's skyline receding behind us. "He outplayed me," he finally admitted, the words clearly painful for a man accustomed to controlling every variable. "Used my concern for you and Zoe as leverage I didn't anticipate. Because you've never had that vulnerability before," I observed, watching understanding dawn across his features as he recognized the double-edged sword of the connection that had grown between us. "Caring about someone gives your enemies power over you. That's why you isolated yourself after losing your family." Gabriel's urgent call interrupted further conversation. Our security had intercepted communications indicating the Rossini family had discovered the estate's location and were planning a coordinated attack within 24 hours. "We need to evacuate immediately," Lucas ordered, already making rapid decisions about resources and destination. Our evacuation to Lucas's Pacific Northwest compound happened so quickly that we barely had time to process the change. New surroundings, new security protocols, and an unexpected isolation that felt both protective and confining. "How long will we keep running?" I asked Lucas that night, as we stood on the deck overlooking the darkened forest and distant ocean. "Running isn't sustainable," he acknowledged, his profile sharp against the moonlight, "which is why I've made a decision that will either save us all or destroy everything I've built over 15 years. The following morning, Lucas convened a video conference with his top lieutenants across the country, outlining a strategy so audacious it left even Gabriel speechless. "We're converting everything," Lucas explained with calm determination. "All assets, all operations transitioning to legitimate businesses within 18 months. Whatever can't be converted will be abandoned." Lucas's response revealed the depth of his strategic thinking, which is why I've compiled evidence packages on both our organization and theirs. Everything goes to the FBI and Chicago PD if anyone moves against our people during the transition, a mutually assured destruction that gives us the time needed to complete this evolution. I watched in stunned silence as Lucas Montgomery systematically dismantled the criminal empire he'd spent 15 years building, not from external pressure but from a choice rooted in something I hadn't believed possible, a desire for a different future that included Zoe and me. "You're doing this for us," I stated later that evening when we were alone. Not a question, but a recognition that demanded acknowledgement. "Risking everything you've built, Everything you are. Lucas took my hands in his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. I'm doing it for the man I wanted to be before my father died and I inherited his choices. The architect instead of the crime boss. The builder instead of the destroyer. On a clear autumn morning in our 3rd year at the compound, Lucas presented me with papers. Legal documents showing the complete separation of all his businesses from criminal activities. FBI agreements granting limited immunity in exchange for evidence against larger criminal enterprises. And a clean slate that, while not erasing the past, created a legitimate future. I can't change who I was, Lucas said, standing beside me on the same deck where he'd first shared his audacious plan. But I've become someone different, someone who might deserve a second chance if you're willing to give it. My answer came not in words, but in the simple act of entwining my fingers with his, as Zoe's laughter drifted up from the garden below, where she was planting spring bulbs with Martha. Some choices, I'd learned, weren't about right versus wrong, but about the courage to build something new from broken pieces. Thank you all for following this story to its conclusion. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support makes it possible for me to continue bringing these stories to life. What would you have done in Carrie's position? Let me know below.